Good evening. Good evening to our viewers in across India. A good morning to those who are, including to our speaker today, who's sitting in Boston. To people on the West Coast, good morning, and those on time zones ahead of us in India. It's probably late in the evening. If you miss it, you will see this on YouTube on Monday morning. This is our 18th webinar. Uh, uh, 2 weeks ago, we had Dr. Ajit Ranade, who was the chief economist at the Aditya Birla Group, talk about inequality. And we looked at it from an economics lens. Today, we're going to take a different approach. We have Harish Hande, Dr. Harish Hande, who thinks of quality of life that needs to be defined in terms of accessibility to multiple needs and opportunities, and not just financial resources. So poverty can be removed if there is better access to health, education, opportunities, livelihoods, and so on. So a lot of people think of SELCO. When you mention SELCO, they think of SELCO, the first thought that comes to them is this is a company that produces solar equipment, solar energy related equipment. But I think SELCO goes much, much beyond that. And you will, when you hear Harish, you will figure it out. Simply because SELCO thinks in terms of sustainable energy access as an enabler to overcome poverty. And I think that's a very important part of the conversation today. More about Dr. Harish Hande, a distinguished alumnus of IIT Kharagpur, went to University of Massachusetts at Lowell for his master's and PhD, came back and founded SELCO in 1995 as a social enterprise. Under his leadership, SELCO won the Ashton Award for Sustainable Energy twice, in 2005 and then 2007. I think 2007, Al Gore presented the award. He was nominated as the Social Entrepreneur of the Year in 2007 by Schwab Foundation for Social Entrepreneurship, became an Ashoka Fellow in 2008, won the Magsaysay Award in 2011, and also was honored with the Karnataka Rajyotsava Award in 2011. In recognition of all his work, the trustees of the University of Massachusetts conferred the Doctorate of Humane Letters of UMass in 2013. So Harish, very well accomplished person, rightfully so, and you will have a fascinating conversation with him. Moderating, what Harish does is Professor Saurav Mukherjee, who was his dorm mate in IIT Kharagpur, and so offline Saurav's told me a lot of things about Harish. But Saurav did his BTech from IIT Kharagpur and then has been a fellow of IIM Bangalore. Has worked in sales and product management positions at IBM and Oracle, and at the Boston Consulting Group as a strategy consultant, and now teaches at the Indian Institute of Management in Bangalore, where he's chair for the Center of Teaching and Learning. I think that's a big part of his effort. He's chair for Management Communications, Center for Management Communications, and occupies the IIMB Chair of Excellence. So all told, we have two very, very accomplished people here, and we look forward to an exciting evening. Dr. Sushila Venkatraman, my colleague at IITACB, will also be part of the moderating group, and will sum it up towards the end. A few rules of housekeeping: questions only in the Q&A box, not in the chat box, because chat boxes are not being monitored for Q&A. And also, this goes back because of our experience across 17 previous webinars. People ask for certificates for attending this. I say this, we don't give certificates. And in any case, you can't get anything from an IIT by attending 1 hour. So not even a cup of chai. So So with all that, I hand over to Dr. Harish Hande to take over from here and speak on how he's using sustainable energy to overcome poverty.
Thanks, Ashok, for that introduction, and it's a great honor to speak here. And we've been discussing a couple of things in where should our country go future now with COVID happening. Where are we? We are at the crossroads of many things. So I just want to start off saying that. Unfortunately, what has happened is the majority of the brunt, whether it's COVID or climate, is actually faced by the poor. And though they're not responsible for both in terms of the climate crisis as well as for the COVID crisis, but they are bearing most of the brunt. Many of us do have today the luxury of working from home. But most of the population does not have that luxury of working from home because somebody needs to build assets. Somebody needs to do the unfortunate, everything else so that our lives will be comfortable. And this inequality of thinking and why is this? Because in many ways, we've been responsible of not creating an ecosystem that provides equal opportunities for everybody. And that for us is something that we need to look at. And as we said that if Shaurav, Ashok, ourselves, Dr. Sushil, all are from IIT background is because many millions of Indians did not write that exam. So let's be very clear. It was an exclusive exam that excluded a lot of people from writing the exam. And that's the paradigm that the way we have created society is both in terms of creating a casteism of education, and also the thought process of that intellectual poverty and financial poverty is the same thing. And which is what makes it more, I won't say the word strongly unethical, but the way we think that we are going to come up with solutions for the poor is also unfortunate because we're not looking at poor as partners, as innovators and entrepreneurs. And that thus what we are negating the potential of the 600 million people that live in our country. Very simple example, I would say, is if I look at we had in our own office, we had two people, one who supplied coffee at tea at 10 o'clock, and she used to give, and the other, her husband used to be sitting in front of the office during the night time. So they both were new. So we asked, what did you do before? They said, we didn't do much. We were just in the village of Gulbarga and we came in search of job. Well, you must have been doing something in Gulbarga. No, we were doing nothing much major. And then as we dug, both were actually brilliant in a sense that were in cotton farming. So just because they were non-English speakers and did not go through formal education that would make them having a LinkedIn account, that we negate their thinking process. Between them, they had not less than 20 years of experience of cotton supply chains. If I had to use the English jargon, knew what the water supply, what water needed for each cotton plant, the productivity of each cotton plant, when the picking should happen, when it should be actually sent for reeling, right? Quote unquote, if they were speaking English, we would call them cotton experts. But what has happened is, under the crisis of drought in Gulbarga, they forcibly were forced to migrate to become what you call it as supplier of tea in SELCO and a guard in SELCO. So what we have done as a country, we have classically de-skilled people. Even if you take skilling today and say that I'm going to train them in motor winding, but you have completely de-skilled a brilliant cotton picker family with multiple generations of experience into doing something that and completely lost that knowledge. So moment you see in Bangalore or Calcutta or Delhi, any of your people who are guarding the buildings, we have de-skilled. We have completely de-skilled because we have unfortunately not given value to that knowledge and value to that physical labor. And that is very dangerous. And we are all responsible. We are all responsible for the institutions that we all come from and why they were set up. So pushing to make it a little more pushback, so why were the IITs in the first place or engineering colleges created to solve the engineering problem? So that's why I keep saying that while when you teach somebody biology for multiple years and the person comes first in mathematics, are we proud about it? You taught biology, but he came first in mathematics. So when people are proud that Sundar Pichai is from IIT Kharagpur, because you taught him engineering, he went into management. So the question, what did 4 years do actually? What happened to the brilliant engineering that we were supposed to have gotten out of? The issue is not about, is where have we created an ecosystem where the problems of the poor are owned by us, and the problem, so that we can actually come up with brilliant solutions where we make the poor as partners and innovators and thought provokers as partners to come up with good solutions that are decentralized and democratized in a where they own the solution. Today, unfortunately, what happens, they own the problems. We come up with a solution and we try to fit a problem to it. We actually are not, we don't own, a lot of us don't own the problem, but we have replaced the colonistic thinking of physical colonization of the British by intellectual colonization. And that is where I think we have as a country, we have a wonderful chance to reverse that, because we have much more obligation to the 2.5-3 billion poor people in the world to create an equitable society, and using technology and the surrounding ecosystem to not only make people's life better and making society equal, but also creating solutions for climate without actually talking of climate. So just one slide I wanted to share to just to give you where I'm actually coming from. And see, today, if you look at why people are poor, I mean, it's not people are poor because they have a choice to be poor, because the ecosystem does not allow them to get out of poverty. It's the five things. That one is the socio and economical inequality that we keep hearing about, right? In a sense that people's opportunities. I mean, to give an example, Saurabh, you've heard this example. When we unfortunately, we are known for solar, but we use solar, as Ashok said, as a catalyst for development. And in a similar slum, that's similar to the photo that you see in Hubli, what we do is we normally put up a solar system for a week. We ask the banker to come. We ask the people to see whether it's valid or not, whether you like it or not. We take it out, and then people will apply for a bank loan. So we put up a similar system in a slum like this for a week. The day we were removing it, the young kid who came back from school, she started washing vessels, a young 8-year or a 9-year-old daughter. And as soon as she saw us removing the system, she started rolling in the floor and said, please don't remove it, because I want to become a doctor. So the question was, I'm sure our society is created in such a manner that she will never become a doctor. She will become another maid servant. But that is the aspirations of millions of 8-year-old girls. What difference was it for her 8-year-old daughter? And my daughter at that time was 8-year-old. Why can't she become a doctor? Because the system will never allow her to become a doctor. The interventions of technology, finance, and intervention models will make sure that she will never become a doctor, because we have created a society that actually pushes for our maid servant's kid to be our kid's maid servant. And so for us is, how do you break that? How do you break that? And so we believe that sustainable energy was a very powerful tool to democratize that. And we look at what is the cyclic poverty, and how do you create a safety net in a manner that people don't have to slip into poverty. And we believe that sustainable energy and interventions of livelihood technologies was a very powerful tool to make that happen. So coming back, what are the 5? Like skewed development, we all know about. Ineffective policies, because many of the policies are done by people like us, never actually indulging the poor as part of that policy making process. We don't even talk to them, right? We decide कि एक survey कर देते हैं, we do a survey and say, what do you need? And that's it. And can you even think about when you're designing a policy for software, we're not going to ask Narayan Murthy or Nandan or Ashok, anybody else. But when it comes to the policy for the poor, we never ask them. We truly never ask them as sitting across the table, because there's a mindset in our product that they are not fit enough to sit across the table. And so that's why the skewed development happens. The other phase is disasters and displacement. If you look at climate change, we only look at disasters like the floods and everything else, but the ongoing disaster of water, for example, in the rural parts, which forces people like to brilliant cotton pickers to shift, is because we have not created the appropriate systems of water in Gulbarga, leading them to lead a healthy, respectful life in Gulbarga itself. We are forcing them. You know, when DLF, we all are proud to talk about Gurgaon being a development city and etc. a showcase. When Gurgaon started in 1992, the water table was at 5 feet. Today, the water table is 2,500 feet below. All the high rises and the middle class and the rich can actually put up water pumps to pump up water for their buildings. The same aquifer is used by the neighboring farmers whose water tables have gone down because of the unsustainable water pumping in Gurgaon. What has that led to? That has led to for them giving up farming and telling their kids, boss, we can't do farming, you go. And then we complain about slum dwelling in Gurgaon. You have created those slums directly by taking away the resources that they were utilizing for centuries in a manner, unsustainability creating Gurgaon and the water. So we are very much, and then we say we're going to do CSR, and then we're going to help the poor, in absolute hypocrisy, right? So this, why are the disasters and developments happening? Ineffective policies and leading to social conflicts, obviously, in a sense that today what's happening today is when a lot of the people will go in terms of the migrants, when we say the first thing that the industry did was fire off the poorest people to make them walk for 1,000 kilometers. Two things. One is we let go of labor because labor is taken for granted, because that's not top management, right? It's like labor, we can get them anytime. So it's a use and throw. Number two, we did not create the appropriate systems where the industries were so unsustainable that they had to remove these laborers out and get it out the day one. Nor did we create appropriates in the rural areas for them to migrate in the first place. And when we wanted reverse migration to happen, when it actually happened, we actually did it in the most unsustainable manner, right? So using those two paradigms, we felt that how do we use sustainable energy as a catalyst for development? While UN, in its typical jargon, created the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals, where you had SDG 1 as no poverty, SDG 8 as decent economic growth, 5 gender, etc., etc. We basically said, how can sustainable energy become a catalyst for development? And so this slide basically says that how can SDG 7 cut across? And what I mean by that is, suppose you have a what do you call it as so Shaurav, please stop me in 20 minutes whenever you can, so that maybe a sewing machine, right? Now we believe that and take the example of central Madhya Pradesh, where there's drought. Now, when there are lots of farmer committing suicides during summer, so what we thought was, why do people commit suicide? Either because there is no safety net. They have taken enough money from money lenders. Suddenly they have miscalculated monsoons. What is plan B? There is no plan B for many of them. So in many of these places, we found brilliant seamstresses, brilliant in terms of making chaddars as well as curtains. So what we did was in many of these places, we provided solar powered sewing machines. And what happens is when a farmer commits suicide, you break the poor into three categories: poor, very poor, and abject poverty. It's not one bracketed segment. When a farmer commits suicide, the family jumps from poor to abject poverty. It takes two more generations for people to actually come back to the poverty sector. Forget lower middle class. So it's very expensive for a country like ours to keep pushing people back into abject poverty because of COVID and climate. So we need to build these safety nets that people don't have to cushion back into the next category. So a solar powered sewing machine is a plan B. So the farmer thinks twice before committing suicide. No, I will be able to pay because there's a plan B. Even if he commits, God forbid, suicide, the family does not dip into abject poverty. But there are a couple of issues. When you design solar powered sewing machines, today somebody blames solar to be expensive, but nobody says the sewing machine is inefficiently designed. And what I want to come back to the fact is, many of the applications today, the sewing machine is inefficiently designed. The lathe making machine is inefficiently designed. The blacksmith blower, many of the problems that the poor face through drudgery, innovations have not happened. And that's why, to this audience, many of these innovations might not look sexy enough on a resume, but those are things that are needed for drudgery and economic development to happen in a decentralized fashion, that people don't need to migrate. And the beauty is that you can solve the post-COVID crisis of employment. And the beauty of India being that you're coming up with solutions that also has solutions to climate change. So whether it's blacksmith blower, whether it is a silk weaving machine, whether it's a dental chair, how is it designed for resource poor areas? So there's a huge potential for us to look at technology, finance, delivery models, catering to 600 million people and not to the 2 billion people in the world. Saurabh, do you want to break there, or do I?
You have a little bit of time for the first segment, so you have another 5 minutes. You can continue.
Okay, sure. To give a specific example, the opportunities for engineers, for financiers, for delivery models, but more from an inclusive perspective. I'm also talking of saying that how do we actually use the engineering skills that exist in the rural areas? That, like, if I have to really innovate on a blacksmith blower, do I actually own the problem? So just to show one livelihoods is. Saurabh, you're able to see?
Yes, now it's good.
Okay, so if you see this puffed rice maker, right? You see this puffed rice? Yeah. So if you look at this puffed rice maker, right, there are many thousands just outside of Bangalore within 100 kilometers making this puffed rice. These are mostly done by very small kids because the space is very small. The temperatures are above 50 degrees in that. And the amount of fuel, and end of the day, they earn less than 50 to 100 rupees on a daily basis. A huge opportunity. Nobody has actually worked on the technology of a puffed rice maker. The design of the system from a technology perspective, the design of the building itself, for example, how do you, and also the kid, instead of going to school, because there's a space, they need large amounts of heat in a small space, only a small kid can crawl and do it. The problem statement itself has not been articulated. And this has been done for generations. Similarly in pottery making, or similarly in blacksmith blower. So my first half I wanted to cover is that our articulation of the problems also have not happened, and we have jumped into IoTs and technologies and web-based interface, while the basic for the 600 million people, innovation actually has not happened. And the beauty of having an audience and a panel like or a webinar like this is, can we inspire the younger generation that these problems are as complex or more complex than what you think of doing an app, for example, right? But have to be solved. It's not, don't trivialize this by they saying that it's a social problem. Simple thing like this, to tell you before I end and hand it over to Shaurav, I broke my head talking to the 5 IITs and could not get a good solution. Some of the solutions that I got are from ITIs, where because the students who come to the ITIs own the problem and they have that fire in their belly that I need to solve it. So my father will have a better livelihood opportunity. My neighbor will have I think that's the same fire we need to have in students to solve the day-to-day technology issues along with finance. I'll come in my second half to some of the solutions and part of it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Harish. So I am seeing a few questions on coming up, but before we go to that, I have a question for you, and maybe that will also answer some of the queries that have been put up. You haven't talked about the market part of it yet, right? And in the sense that many of the stuff that you talk about in terms of this, the cotton example that you gave, or the puff rice example that you gave, there has to be, I mean, there is a powerful force from the market side, and sometimes things don't get recognized, things don't get scale simply because the markets behave in one way or the other. And to some extent, that is also true for students from IIT, right? I mean, why is it that so many of the students of IIT typically jump to do an MBA and then choose a job in banks? And I know these are favorite examples of yours. Rather than staying engineer, and there is a very strong reality of the market, right? So and I think you are a very important person to answer this, because I know that SELCO, you have set it up as a private enterprise. I mean, one of the options that you could have had in 1996 was to set up SELCO as a not-for-profit. But at that point of time, you strongly believed that you must also balance the social need with the market forces. So I would like you to spend some time, maybe either now or when you come with the solutions in the second half, to say that how do we counter or how do we readjust ourselves with the market forces so that we can still meet the purpose of removing inequality, where, part of the reason why inequality exists is because there are market failures, right? So any thoughts on that?
See, Shaurav, the question is, today the market is defined by the elite in many ways, right? Us and everybody else who defines what market is. If you had to ask a blacksmith blower or a street vendor, a simple thing like a street vendor, right? There are 2 crore street vendors in our country, right? Now, but those are not defined as market because we negate it by their affordability terms. But there's many of the solutions that we would give them will not give the profit margins that we would like our salaries and our way of life to be met. And so we don't consider those 2 crore, but they're definitely a market for that segmentation. So why are we only looking at enterprises that can be created by the IITians and the MBAs? So unfortunately, because we are also the policy makers, we make policies according to how our brothers, how our colleagues can actually face, right? But we are not creating policies where a street vendor can actually create a market for herself. We're not doing that. We are only looking at the street vendor as a market, but we never look at a street vendor as an entrepreneur and innovator, how she and he can actually go to become a corporate one way or create a private enterprise that she has a market of her own. So there is a lot of potential in terms of whether you talk about a street vendor, blacksmith blower. And so if you when you brought out the points of SELCO, unfortunately what happens is the true value of SELCO is because out of the 650 employees, 600 employees come from the client base. And it is run for example, when I used to run till 2014, out of that 80% of my colleagues were from the rural areas. Now it's 100% of my colleagues, for example, Mohan Hegde who runs it is from Kumta, and it did much better after I and Thomas left. Much better. SELCO started to do much better after Thomas and I left because it was truly in the hands of the grassroots, and that's the market. So my question is, my point, Shaurav, is, are we creating appropriate ecosystem for people like Mohan, Guru Prakash and Prasanna Hegde to create the organizations, not us? right? The us is because we unfortunately come up with the subsidization of so high called salary and defined market and then profitability, then IRR, which negates the 600 million people. And if we create an ecosystem for 600 million people, there are enough of enterprises, of enough of innovations that will happen. So for me, the market is there, but market according to how the poor define market as, not how we define market as. So if you create a good opportunity for a street vendor to modify a cart, and she should sell the carts to different cart vendors, there's enough market for her to sell the carts. But market might not be defined according to we are, and that's where I have a problem, is the definition of the market itself.
Okay, so something very relevant to what you just spoke, a question from Sumedraj Hindolkar, who is asking that, I mean, sometime back in the talk, you said the system, right? So he is asking that what system is this? Is it the social system? Is it the political system? Or maybe it's the economic system? I mean, what do you exactly mean by a system?
I mean by the system is our own internal system of the middle class. And see, we've replaced, for example, the British, as I said, the British colonized, the British buy the middle class system in our country, which is the thinking process, right? For example, of confusing intellectual poverty and financial poverty. Like, my kid should now compete not because what he or she should do according to his passion, but he should compete so that he earns more than my cousin, right? So the issue, sort of what I face, as I kept telling you, when youngsters join SELCO, the biggest issue that I have is when the parents immediately come to my office saying that, boss, agar SELCO join kiya, iska shadi nahi hoga, because it's social sector mein hai. I said, kisne bataya social sector? This is how that's why we say there are enterprises and there are anti-social enterprises. The issue is I face more problems with the parents saying that uska cousin is earning more. Do you think he has a future? The system, what I'm talking about, is our own system at home. If we truly want to develop society, if we truly want to develop Bangalore, or if we want to truly develop any other poorer parts of the country or the world, the system is us. Are we taking responsibility, or are we typically bhed and bakri and say, bas, बाकी लोग जो कर रहे हैं, जो competitiveness जो create किए ना, in a sense कि मेरा लड़का first आना चाहिए, my kid has to earn more. It's a very unsustainable way of thinking, because you'll always have a pyramid of inequality, and it's like you and me running a race, you and me a running race where we are at 50 meters of a 100-meter race, and we both of us say we won, while many of the poor were minus 50. So that inequality is a thinking system, the systemic racism that we have in our own. Jo PhD kiya on sugarcane is more qualified than a farmer who has done 40 years of sugarcane. I think that systemic thinking needs to change. And then the policies and then that's much easier to do than the systemic thinking. For me, that's the system I'm talking about. Yeah.
A question which is somewhat related to say that if somebody has an idea about, a good technology that will really touch the lives of the farmers, innovation in the rural India, what about investors? I mean, investors are, as commercial and as urban oriented as it comes. And this, I'm sure you have talked about it later. So any improvement in that dimension, or anything that you have found which works with a certain kind of investors who are today willing to invest and take this long-term approach?
There are two things also. There are quite a few investors who are long-term, and some of the investors that we have basically because they come from the older generation. They said, boss, if the type of investors that exist today, and if Citibank started today, Citibank would not have succeeded. Okay. Or GE would not have succeeded. The type of R&D money that GE got when GE started, GE would not have survived in today's type of, because everybody is, the benchmark that has been created is the California tech bubble of investments of faster. And sort of the hypocrisy also has come out recently in the COVID-19. The same investors who went after scale up are telling cut costs. In December, all of them were telling scale up. In June, they're telling cut costs. So what is this? Do you actually know what business you want to do? If you had not scaled up so rapidly before, you would not have to cut up. And that's why sort of in our sector, we think that Uber and Ola are the biggest not-for-profits in the world. Because they will never make money, right? They are the biggest but they are considered market because they're structured. But bull, they are the biggest not-for-profits in the world. So, but to people who've asked this question, who are the investors? They also come from our own family. They also graduated from the IIMs and the IITs. I think somewhere they also have to realize that many of them, and so especially when they come from IIM and IIT, was if you talk of investments the way you talk, IITs should not exist. You would not have got into IIT because you were cross-subsidized by the government, the very economics that you speak about. But on the good side, there's a lot of investors, not a lot, I would say. There is a hope, there's quite a few of them rising up thinking that in this sector, there has to be a long-term strategy of long-term investment. It's not going to be a 2-year exit strategy at 20% IRR. And the only thing that nowadays the Colombian drug lords can give you, but other than that, I think there are hope. But I also ask the audience, tell me good cases where you have scaled up with the IRR serving the needs of the poor, where fundamentally I'm asking a business question. Can you actually get that IRRs? Fundamental. It's somewhere, it's mathematically. Some people say, I've got an IRR, then I see they've got quite a bit of tax incentives. Well, that's a subsidy that you've got. So the question is, let's be very clear. And I think there is a growth of such investors, and COVID has really shown that how the previous model of economics will not actually work.
Okay, and maybe one more question you take before you can go for the second part of your talk. And you have talked about decentralized growth. And there is a question which is coming from Aparna Narayan, who says that, how can we make sustainable energy options accessible to the poor on a large scale such that they can take advantage of it to innovate and elevate themselves? So I'm just building upon her question, saying that, is this large scale the only model to grow? Or definitely you have talked so many times about decentralized yet growth. So can you just help the audience to understand, I think, these two models?
No, I think, see, end of the day, we all want to achieve the same thing, Saurav. The issue is the way we look at is we are saying that we are not let's scale up the processes. And when Aparna asked that question, decentralized, the question is, let's look at a simple example like the sewing machine that I spoke about. The sewing machine had two main components. One is technology and one is finance. And I'll talk about in the second case, the market linkage. But this in Kalahandi, one of the poorest areas of our country.
It is the poorest in the world, actually. Kalahandi district is the poorest district in the world.
In the world, right? Where there were a syndicate bank came and said, we said with 500 families that we wanted to put solar and livelihood options. Obviously, any bank would hesitate. So we put up 100% guarantee for X number of people. And then what happened, Saurav, was that after 6 months, the bank actually told us that they don't need a guarantee because the people were paying the money. Okay. Now, and they had created a program saying that part guarantee of 15% and finance of an interest of 10.5 for these 500 clients. And their recovery rate was 80% to 82% plus. And the people who are defaulting more because of child sickness and everything else, and not because they were crooks. The issue, Aparna, is it's not about scaling that 500. Can we look at scaling the syndicate bank's financing process? So showcasing syndicate bank's 500, we went to Tata Trust and the Manipur Bank, Grameen Bank, and said, can you put up a 10 crore fund for Manipur Grameen Bank to finance livelihood applications for the poor? Looking at that, the other entity came to Jharkhand and say, can we create a 20 crore? Suddenly now we are going to NABARD and say, can we create a 100 crore portfolio fund? See, it's a decentralized at the local level, but the process got scaled up. So what we are pushing for is the process to be scaled up. What was the trigger? And then equally asking Ushas and the singers to make high efficient sewing machines so that the entrepreneur is able to sell the sewing machine with solar panels and financing available. So you have decentralized set of entrepreneurs, but scaled up processes. So today we confuse scaling up with process and organization that everybody has to reach. No, let's scale up the process. So the NABARD's financing, or the technology dissemination, or different type of delivery model, for example. Another example I'll close short of is that in the Majoli Islands, where it's the largest river island in the world, 1 million people live there. So what used to happen is used to be diesel powered boats that you used to go to these islands, and because it is diesel powered boats, and these are young doctors who are studying for other exams, have to have the fan and light the whole night, and the boat has to be running the whole night. And so the diesel would run out and they would come back in 1 or 2 days. So what we did was we powered the boat, not the boat itself, but all the appliances, fans, lights, autoclaves, dental chair, running by solar. So the boat actually does not come back once in 5 days or once in 10 days. So what happened was, Saurabh, is that per rupee, more number of patients were given according to the government of Assam, and per rupee, you needed more number of services you could actually do, right? So we decentralized the option there. So in terms of providing, so what two things happened? One is the government started looking at DRE as a more economic effective tool, and it also pushed back. I wanted a dental chair which has 150 features. Because it has 150 features, it consumes more electricity. I pushed back to the manufacturer saying that I only need 4 features, so that my solar, because of you're not designed it for resource poor areas, why do I need 50th feature, 60th feature, 70th feature? And third is, this process has now scaled up for mobile health delivery, whether it is a van, whether it's a bus, whether it is a boat. So what is the equalization factor? Was mobility, not the boat. We suddenly, how do we scale up boats? No. How do you scale up mobility? How do you scale up people to think that, how do I fit a dental chair in a van, car, bus, train, or a boat? So we need to look at scaling of processes, Saurav. So, and that will lead to scale up of implementation.
Thank you. And for the benefit of audience, I think there's a very beautiful video on this whole example that Harish talked about, available on YouTube. So you can just see it. It is very well made. And that also brings Harish to, it's a nice example of how you are using energy to actually make the healthcare efficient, healthcare system delivery more efficient, right? So, and that's often a basis of how I have seen SELCO transforming from providing light solutions to suddenly saying, or to gradually saying that energy can be used in variety of ways to intervene. So hopefully, Harish, you have caught up with your breath for the break I gave you for about 15 seconds, and you are now ready for your next part of the talk. Go ahead and please tell us what, because audience, and I will pick up some of the questions in the second part.
And also, Saurav, please interrupt me if you think I'm going off track or I'm talking really.
No, you are good. People are enjoying it, so just go ahead.
So the second part, I just want to start with this simple thing as the pottery maker, right? Blacksmith, pottery making, we've seen for generations happening, but we've never intervened in a terms that there could be some sort of interventions. While pottery making, people can relate to. So I just want to see where the excitement of the 600 million people's problems and solutions, which can actually teach the above 400 million or the 2 billion people in the world that, boss, there is an exciting opportunity for us to change. Like here, for example, a lot of the youngsters don't want to do it is because of the drudgery of moving the plate base, and you have to do it with hand, and the loss of incomes. So we basically modified a little bit to make it solar powered, where the pottery maker or the sculptor or the artist, and we call him an artist, started to have multiple other designs, could do multiple other designs on a daily basis, which inspired many of his sons to come back. I don't know whether, Saurav, you remember, Kulal is a person who also did that in IIM Bangalore when we had the SDG workshop. And his kids all saying that, how do we actually make more number, because drudgery. And the beauty of designing from this is also makes it gender inclusive, that you start making a lot of women pottery makers who were unfortunately not part of the system before. Just like in blacksmith, moment you make it drudgery less in terms of physical labor, you also bring in the women component or the gender component into it, and also inspire the youngsters so that you can take it up. So here in this, there are multiple issues that happen. One is the beauty of looking at technology, multiple technologies, back end, fore end. How do you actually knead the mud? For example, is the mud technology, kneading the mud technology, and is it energy efficient? Is the kiln efficient enough? Because a lot of the poor are poor because they spend enormous amount of money in these inefficiencies of products that we have designed. We never look at that any little bit of change in efficiency leads to extra income for them. And working with them, you will actually find out where are they finding the issues. So how do we partner with them? And we worked out different finance. So ideally in this case, I would work with a technology person, hard design person, and a finance person to make a holistic solution for the pottery making. And it becomes more interesting when we suddenly see that the layout of his building was so bad that led to a lot of smoke, where the mud was kept, where the outputs were kept. I mean, why do we design Ford factories, Honda factories? Because we increase the productivity. A good layout of a factory or office space all leads to better productivity. And that's exactly what the poor need, better layout. For example, in this case, it was a redesign of his old building with structures, with daylighting and exhaust fans, with proper where the mud is placed at the outside, where the kilns are placed in a good market in a way that it attracts people, and his workspace actually does not conflict with his family life, because the kid needs to have a space to run, the people need good space to cook in a cleaner environment, not because the pottery is everywhere. So the design. So the beauty of these intervention is that it brings in the design, it brings in financial design, it brings in market linkage design, and it brings in technology. Together is what an intervention actually means. Today, because we are taught in silos, like imagine a tomato vendor who is an expert in selling tomatoes for 20 years. If tomato prices are very high and she says, I cannot because I'm a tomato expert, her three kids will go to starvation. She will start selling potatoes. Why us? When we engineers, oh, I'm sorry, I'm a mechanical engineer. Oh, I'm sorry, I've taken corporate finance. I don't know anything else. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm an electrical engineer. I have no clue what you're talking about. We have got away from being solution providers to be just siloed thinking, which is practically useless for the world in many ways. What the world needs is solution providers. And I wanted to, yes, there are a lot of case studies if people can, but more critically, Saurav, what I wanted to say that sorry. Say that we as a country have a unique chance where India becomes the R&D, because we are a microcosm of the world's problems. That means we can be a solution provider. See, for example, what has happened in the floods of Assam, and the way we would redesign livelihoods and buildings in Assam is something that the Philippines can replicate, because the Philippines goes through the same issue when they have floods. And we could be the same thing that we do in the drought areas of Maharashtra and in Madhya Pradesh. The way we would look at drip irrigation technology, after sales linkage, is something that can be replicated in Ethiopia. And for example, if you look at what happens in the Manipur region, the financial immaturity, and if we come up with new financial models for putting renewable energy, it's absolutely applicable for Tanzania. Sierra Leone, which is 2% electrified, but its HDI index, oh, Sierra Leone, poor people, 2% electrified. Boss, its human development index is higher than parts of Bihar and Jharkhand and Odisha. So whatever we do, and the beauty is in India, is that we can get technology business models applicable in Kalahandi, which gets replicated in Manipur, which gets automatically replicated in Sierra Leone, looking at the cultural context. So our country becomes the R&D hub of solutions, using sustainable energy as a catalyst. So for every inspiring kid in Guinea, Ivory Coast, or in Mozambique, or Indonesia and Philippines needs to look at India and saying that if I go to India, I can learn for success and failures, and India becomes a knowledge house. It's more than just made in India. I think we are in a right position to think about thought in India. And because of the diversity of problems, we also have a diversity of solutions. And that is what Sharma wanted to end is, we have such a wonderful opportunity to look at technology. Because if I haven't even gone into, for example, the various like if to brief, we have agriculture, non-agriculture. We have in the agricultural space, we have milking machines to cotton picking to rice farming to peanut farming. In the non-agricultural space, you have silk weaving, butter churners to blacksmith blower. Huge interventions. It's a completely a whiteboard that is there in front of all of us, and it is for all of us to actually give us to take advantage. And finally, I'll just to one thing I would like to showcase just a sec, so just to show the potential of what I mean is yeah, share screen. Yeah. Just to give you see the breadth and depth that our country can do. Yeah, I'm just looking at dairy, okay? Just looking at a dairy supply chain from hydroponics to shaft cutters, to milking machines, to lighting, to vaccine storage for the cows, to biodigesters, to weighing machine, chillers, butter churner, ice cream machines. All this can be divided into inputs, production, all these 12 nodal points have a huge potential of technology innovation, business and model innovation, and everything actually leads to in a decentralized fashion of productivity and income generation. So before even thinking of IoT and internet and all that, everything else, which is absolutely critical, but there are huge opportunity and potential. This is one only the dairy chain that I'm speaking about. The same thing in poultry, same thing in silk weaving. We have more than 12, 14, 16 nodal points where research, R&D, technology innovations, where India can surely be showcased as thought in India and actually made in India, which can then be replicated in other parts of the world. And that's where I think Sierra Leone, 2% electrified, highest maternal deaths in the world, good examples of maternal delivery rooms with high efficient solar powered autoclaves, delivery room designs can be replicated and blanketed. Sierra Leone, Djibouti has 22,000 square kilometers with 1 million population. Manipur is 22,000 square kilometers by 2.6 million. So whatever Manipur does is very much applicable to Djibouti, changing the cultural, yes, but the processes need to be replicated. And then what needs to be done is the customization of the products and financial products according to what the culture is. So the potential for us to look at is extremely high, sort of. So
Harish, would you stay with that slide on the dairy technology and take us through one intervention, where SELCO has gone and increased the efficiency through redesign and improve the productivity? Maybe just one for the benefit of the audience. And I know you guys have done so many.
So here, for example, if you look at in the shaft cutter, the existing shaft cutters are run on diesel and highly inefficient. So we worked on two types. One is the type of motor and how do we make it high efficient motor and make it DC powered. So you don't need to bring in another inverter. And because many of the shaft cutters, I don't know how many of you know, there are so many drought camps where there are cattle camps in Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh, where the farmers bring those cattle for 4 months or 5 months. Otherwise, they would die in their households. These are cattle drought camps, need a lot of shaft cutters. Just powering them with electricity or diesel is economically very unviable. So in some of the camps, we have put solar powered shaft cutters running on diesel. Then working on some of the people to make milking machine highly efficient, milking machines which were run on diesel. but making it solar powered and also customizing it to the type of udder or the type of cows, so that the suction does not hurt the cows. Where we have worked on efficiency as well as the customization depending on the cows. Then on the vaccine refrigerator storage, this is most, in this case, it was more of a animal vaccine storage. We actually came out with working with organizations like Godrej, giving them multiple sites for innovation, increasing the efficiency, saying that if there is no sunlight even for 10 days, can this vaccine storage be worked? And then working also on business models where Saurav is, because we lack of time, we look at vaccine and milk chillers as assets, and look at financial models that are similar to how airports are financed. See, airports are not financially viable. It is the common good that you and me take the plane that leads to better productivity for the country. So the roads, those are all asset financed by the country, which are subsidized. And exactly what we are saying, that the same type of subsidy needs to be given for large assets where poor make money on the storage, leading to better GDP of the country. So vaccine and milk is not only technology innovation, but it led to financial innovation. So milking, we've worked on all these 12 parts and looked at energy, finance, and long-term thinking. In a sense, in the milk and vaccine, it was how do you bring in asset-based financing? In milking, how do you make a consumptive-based financing under Mudra loan while working on a SHAF under Mudra loan? So and also pushing stakeholders like Godrej's and local entrepreneurs to relook at low resource innovations.
Okay, I have one question before we can go to the audience questions. So, since you started with poverty and inequality, one of the countries which has substantially removed poverty, at least official records, is China. And the Chinese model has typically been described as, and obviously there are generalizations here, saying that create large-scale industrial jobs and get people from rural to urban, give them employment opportunity, give them good, make them financially sustainable, and that's it. And they have been able to remove poverty in a very large scale, and that's what we get to understand about China. So what you're suggesting here is a very different model, right? I mean, what you're suggesting here is a highly decentralized model where we are not even talking of migration, but we are saying that go to the villages and find out the essence of entrepreneurship there, try to solve their problems, and that will be much more powerful way of removing poverty. Is that what you're talking about?
It's a long term. If you look at, unfortunately, what happens is poverty is an up and down. Today, see, for example, in the COVID crisis, and as soon as production came down, China also laid off a lot of people. Right now, you have created the poor not as an intellectual force, but purely as a labor force. Right? It's an use and throw. What is an aspiration that we have created? It's not democratization of the innovation. So they have killed a lot of the aspiration and innovativeness that would have been there. Number two, and I also take from our failures in our own failures in the IT sector. Moment we created the calls, let's look at a smaller analogy, sort of in the call center. Okay, we created multiple call centers. We enticed a lot of the people, rather than from studying physics, chemistry, or basics, into becoming English speakers, joining call centers. And moment Vietnam and Philippines, which has a better English accent, the whole call center moved to Philippines. Yeah, right?
The voice part of it, yeah.
Exactly. Moment the labor force in Nigeria or Vietnam becomes cheaper, people will move. The iPhone production will move to all these places. So we are somehow, it's just like dependence on oil, on other countries, on foreign exchange risk. We are dependence on business. My question is, first is, we are looking at what the markets are and then designing the skill set. That's not what it is. First, we are not seeing what is the well-being of the person itself. Let's approach from there, what he or she needs to well-being, rather than saying that what the markets are. This decentralized portion makes it very solid, strong, that very difficult to shake. I mean, why did in India 2008 did not get shaken by the world? Because we were still very decentralized. The kirana shops, the ironing shops, everything was decentralized. We are a decentralized nation. Why were we forcing and breaking the basic fabric of that, but make it more applicable for other countries to follow? And using sustainable energy from a climate perspective. So rather than complaining that others are doing and we are suffering, boss, let us say that even while we are suffering, we are coming up with solutions that Africa, Latin America can follow. Boss, ultimately, Washington and London, you need to follow of this pattern of sustainable living. Not in a romantic way, but in a way that how poverty, because these countries also, if you look at Paris, why is the problems happening? Because of inequality. Why does the whole Black Lives Matter movement come in? Again, poverty and unequal development in the most capital markets. And the second I want to ensure of is that when we talk about markets, if that was so successful, why did Europe and America come up with such a large subsidy to save the SME sector? Billions of dollars to save the SME sector.
So there are plenty of questions about our education policy, and there are questions about have you actually looked at the new education policy and your talks about. So any thoughts on that, or in the way what according to you should be a very ideal kind of education?
No, it's interesting, Saurav. I'm in the last 2 days, I had 2 webinars. One was a bunch of 15-year-olds, and one was a bunch of 18-year-olds, a very specific age group. The 15-year-olds ripped me apart. Okay. And they had read more on the education policy than I had. So I'm more prepared because they had really read it and said, and these are from US, India, all Indians, but UK, all these Indians, and under something called as Mahatma program. They're 15-year-old. Well, the question they asked me on education was, and they hit the right mark. All that is possible, sir. How do you convince our parents? How do you convince our parents that 90 is no difference than 92? But if my cousin earns 92, gets 92 on maths, I am blamed for getting 2 marks less than him or her, right? So it is how our parents are telling sometimes, and some of the other kids were very more brutal, saying that why is our parents' dreams put on us? We have our own dreams. Yes, you have provided a good education. I think it's more than education policy. I would go at home level, Saurav. It is, see, who defines the policy? The IS officers and all come from our own cadre, right? Or people who design the education policy all come from our own cadre. First, I'm questioning ourselves. Where is the pushback? See, all our parents know when IIT में, ठीक है, first job मिलेगा क्या? Civil engineering या energy में जाएगा तो job मिलेगा क्या future में? 4 years में क्या होने वाला है? Why? It's all about that one small notion of job. We are not at home itself breaking that creativity. And I would not even go into the gender, which is another issue about where the girl child, I mean, we are completely losing potential of the 50% of our population. But education policy is defined by our own people. So criticizing them is actually of no use where we think holistically. But I would actually put the onus in some of the autonomous institutes like the IIMs and the IITs and the other colleges like the TAPMEs to redefine their own policy inside. Like how many courses do we actually have that are practically linked, saying that this course will lead to some sort of a needle moving in rural India or elsewhere, right? This course is actually multi-directional where I have one finance person, one technology person, one architect, and an ITI student as part of the team building. See, many of the education institutions also hide under the fact because there's somebody else made the policy. See, the question is, I would go back to an example of Martinez. Martinez was this farmer who met me I met him in 1991 when I went to Dominican Republic. And that's the whole concept of SELCO. According to our definition, he was uneducated because he had no literacy. But that's why, what's the definition between literacy and learning is I still don't know. But he went inside the house and switched on the lights 3 times and said, see, my light is working because I'm switching it off. I control it. You know how it runs? By solar power. Nobody can switch it off, utility. He said, but I have a problem with you Indians. He said that whenever I meet an Indian, you guys have developed America, you have developed Europe and all that, brilliant engineers, doctors. Anytime I hear an Indian, he always complains. That has not happened. That has not happened. The government has not done the policy. When are you going to take personal responsibility and say, I am going to do it? Forget the government, forget anybody else. I am going to say that. And he told, selfishly, I'm telling you, because if India does not develop, Dominican Republic will not develop, because we look at India, because you have the best of both worlds, and America is not going to teach us how to develop. You guys are going to teach us, and you yourself are going to complain half the time. What solutions, what you have the best in the education in the world. And I think this is where I would say is that while we wait for a policy to come out, and if you go to any IS friend of ours, he says, Harish, बहुत जन complain करता है, but moment you tell them मेरे को दो solution दो, बस nobody has a clue of what solution have, because practically they are not ingrained in what the problems are. I think, but I would put the onus back on some of the innovative autonomous institutes in our country to showcase how an education policy should be determined as. Today, we're not creating that benchmarks, and we are thinking that the benchmarks will be created by the policy. No, the policy should be determined by the benchmarks created by somebody. And some people have to take the risk of doing that. I mean, when you make a road, there is no policy for a road. We say the road has to be defined just like the US highways or European highways or Delhi highways. So we have a benchmark. या हमको लड़की को हाई जंप में जाना है, किसके जैसे? Should it be Olympic gold medal? So we know how to train कि 2.9 meters में high jump होता है. National 1.8. We know the benchmarks. But unfortunately here, a policy did not define कि Olympic gold medal के लिए 2.91 होना चाहिए. No, it is somebody who strived and made it. I would request some of the educational institutions to create that benchmark so the policy can follow rather than following the policy. And that is my problem in industry, carbon policy, sustainability, poverty, is that we are not leaders, we are followers. And the people who design the policies, unfortunately, are constrained because they are not given such many options to actually create a good policy.
So there are a few questions about working with the government itself, and what has been your I think experience in taking some of these at a policy level. Many of the solutions that you're talking about through SELCO or associated ones, how does one translate that into something which can be adopted at a policy level? What has been your experience so far?
See, for example, just like if I take the name of Korean, okay. And if I look at TN Session, right, all these guys were single people who changed what needs to be done, right? Like Korean completely redefined the cooperative movement and the milk movement. TN Sessions have defined the election commission, right? But Saurabh, there are so many Koreans and Sessions at all levels of society, okay? But we are not able to, like, see what happens is, suppose I have to go to, I'll give you two examples. If I have to go to North Karnataka, Gulbarga, okay, and want to look at a water resistant technology for different cropping patterns, I'm not going to look at a policy. I'm going to say who is a champion farmer, whom a lot of people hear, or what is that glue to that society? Whom do they listen to? Is it the local preacher or a church or a temple or a postmaster? Who are they? Can we actually work with that opinion maker and a mover, society mover, to make one thing happen, or a ZP leader, okay? And suddenly you see a transformation in 2 years because you had one champion take it forward. See, we are all champions. See, everybody says that, oh, that's not sustainable, Harish. I said, well, everything depends on individual. If that was not the case, then why did US break the deal with Iran? It all depends on one change of a president which broke the deal with Iran. So it was not institutionalized, right? So nothing is institutionalized. It all depends on the people. So when we went to Megha, the second example is when we went to Meghalaya, we found a brilliant DC, one DC, okay? We knew that he had a time frame of 2 years. Can we do something that influences his district at that point of time? And within 2 years, he's able to tell to somebody upstairs that, boss, this is a great. So what we did with 10 public health centers using solar power, the guy got very good. Can we do 20 of them? In meantime, he called up one more champion in the upper, from the health ministry in Manipur. Suddenly what that guy says, can we do 200? Blanketing blanketing Meghalaya completely with all PHCs, solar powered with high efficient maternal delivery. Suddenly a scale up happened because there were two champions. So the question is also, are we creating a roster? For example, financing is hard, but my colleagues, what they maintain is in their phone, a list of 300 champion bankers, and they monitor where these bankers are getting transferred in the rural areas. If one banker is transferred from village A to village B, we trigger off village B because this champion banker is there. So it's, and also like this young IS officer who is the East Garo Hills DC, brilliant work in East Garo Hills. I mean, the only point short of is that he is from Azad. The question is not from the fact is Azad Hall. I mean, it's a private joke, guys. But the fact is, he, for next 25 years when he's in service, he will make sure that these things get scaled up. Okay. Are we creating champions in other industries to make that happen? And that's what, and suddenly what happens is, if tomorrow Swapnil is part of a policy, he will make sure that this becomes a part of the policies. See, are you also like or Mr. Shiv Kumar, who is now the head, he's said, I want to make it a blanket policy on Manipur. See, the policy also changes. Are you able to cater to somebody who is able to understand what you're speaking and also going to push back? No, Harish, this cannot be done because, like, for example, we are trying to change the tendering policy for energy appliances in WHO. Okay, in who? We have a champion now. He's telling, first takes the low-hanging fruits, which will impress my second level. The third fruits, fourth level, fifth level. Suddenly, they have come up and said, to the highest level, how do we change the energy policy for maternal delivery rooms? Because we saw your work in India and what you have proposed for Sierra Leone, which has the highest maternal deaths in the world. Can we do blanket Sierra Leone? See, you'll have to work individually and suddenly a blanket policy comes in place.
And you are saying that there are enough people with the right mind and right heart. So
there are,
yeah.
Out of all the IS officers, 60% are great, and you can pick. It's a problem is we blanket and say that everybody is bad or good, or politicians, man. The other thing is that an IS officer taught me, Harish, if you want to get more, make sure that you impress one politician, because every 5 years he has to write an exam. We don't have to write an exam, right? You convince some of the champion. You know, some of the rural MLAs are extremely brilliant. The problem is, they are non-English speakers and we negate speaking to them because, oh, the role. Boss, unka philosophy and some of the MLA's thought process is beyond anybody. They will teach us economics to everything else. Isliye hum log kya karte hain ki Karnataka mein lot of Kannada speaking MLAs, Manipur, everything. Well, there are brilliant ones that we pick up and talk to them on a every alternate week. We talk to this MLS, is it what it is? And after one or two meetings, you know, they will completely shed that they are not selfishly talking to you. They're talking, okay, Harish, if you really want to push the MLA policy thinking tank group, you need to get through this. And they, many of them, at least 40 to 50% cut across party lines.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But we're not giving the platform to them, yeah.
I think there are some students among the audience who are asking this question, and there are two types. One is to say that if they don't have great opportunity, and some people are using the term, you know, I am not an IITian, but can you advise something and all? And I am using IIT just as an opportunity space. So what is the general advice for the young generation for you? That what are some of the things that should be look out if they really want to go out and solve the problems, and to some extent not do the same? I think you definitely think we have done a lot of mistakes in life. Not do the same mistakes of, you know, starting our career on subsidized engineering and then going and doing something else. But in general, I mean, for the younger people, what is the advice?
First is, boss, my question is, sometimes when people look at role models, you know, in the sense that don't just go to the highest role. There are role models that you inspire, but also make sure that you, before thinking anything, you think that you have no solutions. The question is, sometimes, a lot of times we start with a solution and we say that we're going to fit a problem. Start owning the problem. So suppose in our field of energy access, like a lot of the colleagues who join, the first question, do you actually own it? Do you actually feel what it means to be without energy or lacking, that you don't have a salary for 2 months, something that hunger has stuck you, or do you actually feel it? If you don't feel the problem, you'll never come up with the right solution. And the fire in your belly is when you start owning the problem. Otherwise, you hear this cliche sort of, is that I have maxed out in a company. I have no idea how can anybody max out in a company. My growth is limited. Your growth. So are you not innovative enough to create your own growth, right? Or no, people are not allowing me. But question is, अगर आपको दिल्ली जाना है, so when the youngsters call कि boss ये barrier है, I said बस लड़की या लड़का ढूंढे रोमांटिक में भागने का कोई उसमें कोई बैरियर नहीं आता है, राइट? उसमें आप कुछ भी बैरियर कर सकते हो, बट दिस इज अ प्रॉब्लम इज सिमिलर. यू नीड टू फाइंड प्लान ए, प्लान बी, प्लान सी एंड प्लान डी. And for the younger generation, start, if you've graduated from IIM, IIT, REC, it doesn't matter, any college, just breathe yourself. Now you have a whiteboard. Don't take your certificate. That certificate is a piece of paper which is of no use to many of us. It is okay, I want to do this. I want to try why the water is leaking, or agriculture. Can I actually spend my brain space just learning? Now your actual learning starts. Those were tools in the education system that will use. Can you start articulating problem? The first thing we ask the youngsters is, can you write the problem statement? I don't care what solution you have come up with. Can you articulate the problem? How deep it is, how long? I think for that, if you're in the space like we are, and the best thing, if you're in the space you really want to get into off-grid or into energy space, take an unreserved compartment from train ticket from Delhi to Calcutta via Dhanbad, and travel in the unreserved compartment multiple times, and that will be more than an initiation for you, in a sense. So own the problem. Do you actually? So for me, the problem was the moment an auto rickshaw driver calls me sir, that meant there's a gap between him and me. And how do we break that? You should be sitting in a bus in a rural area, and I would measure the success if people will confuse you with a farmer and not with an IMB graduate. Then you have truly reached the stage of that level. Until we don't equate ourselves in terms of, boss, there's somebody, I mean, they knows more, they know 100. Can I be a listener or a partner or a thinker? Do that. Humble yourself and negate all the learning teachings, but start learning now.
There are now questions saying that how can people know more about the kind of work that SELCO is doing, and more about some of these interventions that you have done in increasing the productivity of a machine or replacing it with solar. So what is a good way of
just write to me directly. I'll make sure that you're directed to different people in the organization. That Harish at SELCOfoundation.org. Write to me, and then definitely not an issue. 24/7. Yeah.
Question for IIT alumni: how can IIT alumni play a significant role in influencing the education in the right way, or setting up or giving the direction in the sense that you have talked about so long? Is there
there is sort of, we know the type of coursework. See, हम लोग lab क्यों जाते थे IIT में? The fact is, वो lab उसी दिन के लिए जाते थे ना. So after that, we have forgotten what the lab was about. There is very less connection to. I mean, we keep saying that you and me can wonderfully write the thermodynamics of a car, but if a car is kept in front of us, both of us will run away. You will run faster because you're a trained runner. The question is the fact is, the practicality of a lot of the things that we are taught, even, I mean, both of us came from IIT Kharagpur. 50 kilometers down outside of Kharagpur, people don't have water, people don't have electricity, people have no issue. It's a microcosm of what problems. What has IIT Kharagpur done for so many, except volunteered? We have not come up, all IITs, I'm questioning. We need to create courseworks that inspires without a grading system as an incentive, but as an incentive, but can you take it forward? Can you can the next generation of IIT, the graduates, take forward a problem that in this village, in this technology, we have to, one is cross-cut departments, making it too much mechanical, electrical, etc. But I would say 90% of our coursework should be practical oriented and graded on practicalities, and not on how much equations we solved. अगर ball फेंका ऊपर कितना देर में आया, क्या फर्क पड़ता है, अभी ball नीचे आया ऊपर आया, बस. You all know that, right? The question doesn't affect a single life in our country. I think practical oriented, as we've been speaking about it, sir, but I think some institutes needs to take by the bull of the horns. And unfortunate, some of the directors say the system is like that. I said, director, you are the system, boss. Don't complain about it. You are the system. There are 20 to 30% changes you can. Don't blame that the professors are not allowing me or the system does not. I don't buy that argument at all. If you are a director of IIT, you can at least change 40% of what is needed. Don't tell me that you can't do it. I'm sorry. That excuse is out of the window. You have to do that. I think that, and simple to my other colleagues, like for example, like Tony, the Tony works and Tony Sheldon works, and these guys. There are beautiful examples around the world that bring in practicality, and the unfortunate part in America and US and Europe is that they do not have the problem at their doorstep. They are innovating a solution that is far away culturally as well as technically. We have the problem at the doorstep. So we can experiment in R&D today. And that's the leverage we don't want to lose. And I think the IITs, and also one more thing, Saurav, is we need to break that. See what we have, the IITs, the RECs, Engineering College, and ITI. Actually, it has to be like this. It has to be at the same level because everybody is complementing each other. And I think this hierarchy is killing us in many ways. The ITI students should be able to go into any IIT and be able to use the labs because they own the problem. I would say every IIT project, if there are 4 students, 2 should be from local ITIs. That will level. Then एक आया था कि IIT professor phone करके मेरे को बोलता, Harish, there will be intellectual gap. I said, क्या हो गया? IIT JEE का standard नीचे चला गया क्या? Has it gone down? So that is racism, right? That is racism कि तुमने ITI student को below माना करके. That we need to break. कि boss, they are brilliant, hats off. And how do you break? And how do you cross-culture students to work together is where, and make them all solution-oriented.
Okay, so maybe the last one before we hand it over to Dr. Sushila. You have talked about it before, that creating some kind of database of problems, because very often it happens is maybe there are people who are very eager to solve, but we don't know where the problem exists, or maybe we sometimes even reinvent the wheel. I mean, all the good things that you're talking about, maybe in another remote part of India, somebody's still breaking their head how to make a start. So any effort in that dimension, or how should we go about it?
No, see, one is we've done our own database, but what we've not put into place, Saurav, is something that we should work together, and the institute that Ashok is actually leading now should be one of the areas where, one of the places which is an independent entity, which brings in, see, we have our own database, right? Which even with whatever we talk about, it has a subtle bias on SDG 7, that is sustainable energy and everything else, right? But an institute, a neutral institute like the IIMs, as well as what Ashok's creation is, where you have a centralized database, which is then neutralized, where you have various other people, architects to engineers to social scientists to Nobel Prize winners, can actually come and start looking at the database and come with various solutions. I agree that actually in our space, 80% of the work is being reinvented. Sort of when somebody came up with a high profile funder and a high profile entity came in India to look at water pumps, I actually took out a 1987 paper and show how it was done in 87. You forget what 87, and we are reinventing the wheel again. And there's a new water pump model. What new water model, right? If some independent institutes could create that, it is the need of the hour. While SELCO has its own, and people please write to me, and I'll give, I mean, my colleagues will give access to it, but it has to be much larger than just SELCO. It's like, for example, we might not be looking at water efficiency, that somebody else would be looking at energy and water efficiencies together and give a feedback to SELCO saying that, have you looked at it, could actually make it system better. So yes, there is a need, critical need, that I will leave it to Ashok to.
Great. So I will hand over now the session to Dr. Sushila Venkatraman. But before that, wonderful once again listening to you, Harish. Sushila, over to you.
Thank you, Harish. That was a very thought-provoking session, which is what we see also from feedback of many of the people who are in the audience today. Indeed, it's been a session that has walked us through a very wide range of issues and topics. But just a few takeaways. one of the key things you talked about is how do we become solution providers? And you said that we have to start by feeling the problem, be able to articulate the problem correctly, and then look at solutions. And the solutions have to be better designed to improve productivity, to reduce fatigue and drudgery and all the rest of it. But two other things. One, that it should be environmentally friendly, and two, that it's got to help make that area gender inclusive. I think those are very significant statements that personally I take back. You also talked about involving those who are going to use the solution right from the time we build the design the solution. And also, this is a theme that we've been hearing time and time again, that increasingly we need to be looking at multidisciplinary solution design. You touched upon intellectual versus financial poverty, and the fact that unless we get to involve the poor in the policy making, in solutions design, in the processes and the systems, we are not going to be able to do the kind of the equity and building the equitable growth that is just not going to be possible unless we look at all of these areas and involving the poor in every one of them. I think we also looked at, and this is the theme of this discussion today, is India as the R&D hub of the world. And you brought in this interesting concept of moving from make in India to thought or think in India. And post-COVID, one of the key things that's going to happen is everyone has said that whatever area they're working in is not going to be the same anymore. And you talked about economics as we knew it, is not going to be the same going forward. So there is obviously a very big opportunity in all of this for us in India, just because we are a microcosm of the world, just like an Indian organization is a microcosm of every single subsidiary that it has across the world. So, if we are able to solve a problem for India as a whole, then we have actually solved problems for many parts of the world. Again, involving the users in the tech and designing the solution is going to be absolutely key to making sure that that thinking process is robust and effective. I think there were a couple of aspirational statements in what you said, and I think those are very inspiring for all of us. One is moving from followers to leaders and creating benchmarks. And for me, it's not just about the educational institutions setting benchmarks that then policy follows, but creating benchmarks in many, many other ways, which is what SELCO has done. I'm reminded of Star Trek, which is our generation. And I would say, you've gone where no engineer has gone before. So I must say that just listening to the journey and the way you've rethought many of the concepts that we've been taught, say in an MBA, is absolutely fascinating. And for our audience, I think there are a couple of challenges that you've thrown. One of them is Dr. Hande today talked about sustainable energy as a catalyst of poverty alleviation. I think the challenge to all of us is, can we, each of us, think of whatever area we are in, whatever we do, can we think of it as a catalyst of equitable development? So can we rethink the way we approach our problems, our organization, and whatever we do? And the second challenge that we have in front of us is, how can India be a thought center for the world? And can every one of us learn from the SELCO journey and what Dr. Hande has said today? So that, because it's not just about the idea, that India can be a thought center. It can be a thought center if all of us do something about it. So I think these are challenges that you have given us. So thank you very much for it, Harish. Saurav, thank you so much for readily accepting to moderate this discussion, and your deep involvement with everything that SELCO has done over the years was really very valuable for the whole discussion. Our audience, thank you very much for being part of this webinar every week. We look forward to your joining us again next week as well.